said I was finding myself in Bali. He was gone before I got back. Everything was going great. Really, it was going amazing, in fact. I had the perfect life. I had everything that I'd ever wanted, and then I lost most of it because I decided to be selfish for once in my life. Let this post be a lesson to most of you. If you think you've been working hard all your life and need to take some time for yourself, a little break away from constantly being selfless, don't do it. Or at least think twice before you do, because it'll probably come back to bite you in the ass. Or at least that's what happened to me. And it's all because of a stupid trip for my birthday. But before I get to that, first I have to give you a bit of context. I've been married almost 10 years. I met my husband Vincent, male 32, when I was 22, just starting nursing school. I was always stressed. I'd wanted to be a nurse for as long as I could remember, but years of exams and shadowing had worn me down. The excitement was gone, and I became more focused on surviving school than saving lives. One night, or morning since it was already 4 a.m., I was driving back to my apartment after a pretty grueling shift. I could barely keep my eyes open and considered if I should just spend the night at the hospital and drive home after I'd gotten some rest so I wouldn't crash into a stop sign or something. I never got the chance to decide, though, because my car gave up on me. It started with weird noises that made me pull over and ended with silence. No matter what I did, it wouldn't start again. The car was older than me, literally my dad's hand-me-downs, so I wasn't shocked it died. I was just shocked it had the nerve to die that night. I sat inside my car for almost an hour thinking of what to do. I tried getting a ride, but there were no drivers in the area. I debated walking back to the hospital, but then immediately discarded the idea since I was too far away. I was in the process of deciding which of the other nurses I could call to come get me when a car pulled up beside mine. Of course, I was immediately apprehensive, and naturally I looked around my car for some sort of weapon as the stranger got out of his car and walked up to mine. I had only managed to find an old umbrella by the time he knocked on my window and waved. I was still wary, but I whined the window down, just a bit, so I could hear him. He introduced himself as Vincent and asked what was going on and if I needed some help. I was tempted to tell him that I was fine, so he would leave me alone, but I was tired and didn't have the energy to lie. All I wanted was to get some sleep, so I told him that my car was having trouble and asked if he knew anything about cars. He didn't, but he offered to give me a ride to my place instead, and I was so exhausted that I didn't even try to say no. I just got in his passenger seat and tried not to fall asleep as he drove. We barely spoke except when I gave him directions and he asked me some basic questions about myself. We got to my place pretty quickly and he surprised me by handing me his card. Said that I should take it in case I ever wanted to talk or needed another ride out of a sticky situation. I thanked him and stepped out, knowing full well that I would probably never reach out. I just didn't think there was any need. We barely spoke and I didn't find him all that interesting or cute, so I tossed the card somewhere and forgot about it. But then weeks later, when I was cleaning, I found it again, and I don't really know why, but I felt this urge to call him. Maybe I was bored or in the mood for a date I knew wouldn't go anywhere. Or maybe it was that I remembered that I never properly thanked him for helping me out. I don't know, but it felt like I needed to give him a call, so I did. He was surprised to hear from me, almost like he knew when he was giving me the card that I would probably throw it away. We talked for a bit, and it was a pretty pleasant conversation. Nothing felt forced or too awkward. So when he asked if we could get lunch the next day, I agreed. Lunch with Vincent wasn't really what I expected. We had nice conversation, yes, but he ultimately struck me as someone who was incredibly boring. He was some sort of financial analyst, and his work was mostly remote. He didn't do much, and the things he did do, I wasn't really interested in. So I didn't really have my hopes up. But it went really well. He was funny and charming. So much so that it almost made up for what he lacked in the facial department. He was a very likable guy, and by the end of our lunch date, despite actively avoiding it, I felt drawn in. He obviously wanted to continue seeing me, but I was beyond hesitant. I didn't have the best track record when it came to relationships. My schedule at the hospital was hellish, and when I wasn't there, I was sleeping off the exhaustion from my shifts or trying to make it up to my friends after bailing on our third hangout in a row. I didn't have time for relationships, much less a serious one. Most of the romance in my life came down to causal hookups and random dates. I could tell Vincent wanted something serious, so I tried my best to let him down easy. But no matter what I did, I couldn't get him to stay away. He would call and check up on me, send me texts to see how I was during my shifts. It was all so sweet. I couldn't help the feelings I started to get. It only got worse when he escalated from calls and texts. His work was remote, meaning he had a good bit of free time on his hands when he wasn't working, and he made sure to take advantage of that. He would bring me lunch a few days out of the week or offer to drive me home after a long shift no matter the hour. He was the perfect partner. Only about 2 months after our first date, he managed to wear me down, and I agreed to be his girlfriend. I never imagined that it would last long or get too serious. I thought that Vincent would surely get tired of me hardly ever being available and being constantly tired when we spent time together, but he didn't. He was there every step of the way. Before I knew it, months had turned into years, and we'd been together for a while. I'd never really seen myself getting married. I'd never been one of those girls that fantasized about her wedding day and her future husband. But after spending so long with Vincent, I started to see a life with him. He was reliable and providing me with stability. He was caring, a bit needy and overbearing sometimes, but I could tell that his heart was in the right place most days. I knew he would make a good husband. So when he asked me to marry him, I said yes. Being married to Vincent was great, honestly. It really was. I moved into his apartment after a few months, and then after years, and with help from our parents, we got a house. Everything was going good. I thought I had done what I was supposed to do. I had followed all the steps that people were supposed to take in life. I had a stable job, stable income. I was married to a man that genuinely loved me, and I cared for him. My life was technically perfect. It was all fine. Or at least that was what I told myself each time I got back from work, and felt almost disappointed when I walked into the house. Or when I got back and saw that Vincent was home and hadn't spent the night at his friend's place or with his family. Or when his near constant texts and calls only made me upset. It took me a while to notice that what I was feeling wasn't just disappointment, it was also suffocation. I felt suffocated by everything around me. My job and all the work I had to do. My friends and their constant requests to see me. Vincent. It all got to be a bit too much for me. I felt trapped and like I wasn't satisfied with the life that I was living. Something had to change. I knew that I needed to do something. I just didn't know what yet, and because of that, I didn't really know how to explain how I was feeling to Vincent. So I kept things to myself until months later when my 30th birthday was coming up. Vincent had surprised me with the tickets for a trip to Bali weeks before, and I started to think that the trip was what I needed to feel better again. I needed a break. Some time away to regroup and get back to myself. The only problem was that I also needed my space. I wanted to go on the trip alone. The expensive couples trip Vincent had pitched to me didn't interest me anymore. I wanted to be by myself. I needed to get away from everything that I felt was holding me down. Unfortunately, Vincent was a part of that. He didn't take it the best when I told him that I was going on the trip alone. He didn't understand why I wanted to, or why I would need space from him, but I didn't really care enough to go out of my way to explain it. I told him that I had lost my spark and needed to find myself, and that Bali was the only way that I could do that. He didn't like it, but he ultimately wanted me to be happy, so he accepted it. It immediately felt like a weight was lifted off of my chest. I took advantage of my vacation days and took some time off of work. The trip Vincent had planned would take up almost 2 weeks, so I needed enough time. I was full of excitement in the days leading up to my trip, and I told Vincent that once I got back to myself after those 2 weeks, things around the house would go back to how they were. I would be happier again and more romantic. Maybe our sex life would even get better. Of course, this made him feel better about the trip and me going alone. Bali was beautiful. It was even more wonderful than I had imagined. Everything was gorgeous and colorful, and everyone at the hotel was so friendly. My first night there was the first time in years that I slept for more than 8 hours. I was fully prepared for 2 weeks of relaxing by the beach and not having to sort pills, but when I got to the front desk, they told me that my trip had already been planned out. Apparently, Vincent had signed us up for a bunch of stupid bonding activities. I couldn't believe that he would be so insensitive, to plan what was supposed to be my breakaway around meaningless things like snorkeling or some group bonfire. Things I wouldn't even want to do. I was about to tell the hotel that I wasn't interested in any of the activities when someone walked up to me and introduced themselves, That was how I met Milo, my guide, and the reason I'm in the mess I'm in now. Milo was by far the most beautiful man I'd ever seen. He was tall and huge, really tan and handsome. He was practically the opposite of Vincent, and for a second I was dumbstruck. He was the one who convinced me not to drop the activities. Was my decision possibly influenced by the fact that Milo was the one who would take me to and coach me through all of it? Maybe, but only because he seemed so nice and welcoming. Things between us were strictly friendly at first. He would wake me up with a knock on my door and some breakfast he'd gotten from the buffet downstairs, and then I'd follow him around as he took me from place to place, showing me the island and encouraging me to partake in whatever touristy thing Vincent had booked for the day. The activities were the worst part. I never really enjoyed them, but I enjoyed Milo's presence a lot. He was very kind and very comforting. Just a few days into the trip, and I had practically spilled my life story to him. We were getting drinks. I hadn't had a lick of alcohol in months because the hangovers weren't worth it, especially when I had 10-hour shifts. So just a few drinks in, and I was already past tipsy. I told him about my job and how stressful it was, how fed up I felt. For a while, all I did was rant about my job. Anyone who heard me would think that I hated it. I didn't. I loved being a nurse. But the hours spent constantly on your feet, rushing to this ward and the next, were no joke. Milo was such a good listener. He was attentive and actually remembered what I talked about. I didn't even know when talking about my job progressed to talking about my husband. I was pretty drunk, so I don't remember everything that I said, but I remember telling him that I felt like the spark had died out between us, and that I didn't love him like I used to. God, it's so embarrassing to think about now, how I poured my heart out to someone I had known for all of 4 days. But in the moment, Milo didn't make me feel embarrassed. He didn't make me feel anything but understood. I remember that he even reached for my hand and rubbed my wrist to make me feel better. The touch didn't make me feel better. It just made me confused, and it made me realize how close we were and how much I didn't want to move away. I'd never thought of cheating on Vincent before or even considered leaving him. I don't think I ever had the energy or the time to even entertain such thoughts. But then I was free. I was in Bali. I was drinking cocktails with a beautiful man by the beach. I had all the time in the world to think about how much I wanted to kiss Milo. I remember leaning in before I could think better of it and kissing him. He kissed me back, but it only lasted a few seconds before he pulled away. He must have been just as confused as I was. I had just finished telling him about my husband, and now I was kissing him. It made sense that he pulled away, but it didn't hurt less. And I know that I had no right to feel hurt. I know. But I did, and because of that I ran away from the bar and up to my room as fast as I could. Avoiding him went about as well as you would imagine, considering he literally worked there. I saw him the next morning at breakfast, and he tried to apologize to me. It seemed ridiculous even then that he would apologize when I was the one kind of in the wrong. We agreed to just forget about it and move on, to continue being friends and get through the trip. That lasted almost 2 days. It happened after a whole day in the water. We went swimming and snorkeling. It ended up not being as bad as I thought it would be. We watched turtles and other animals in the water. After everything, we spent the while walking on the beach and talking about random things. We sat down together with our legs in the sand, and it was such a wonderful night. I knew that I should have been keeping my distance, but I couldn't help myself. I leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around me. We kissed that night, but it didn't end there. He followed me up to my hotel room, and we ended up having sex. I thought things were going to be just as awkward as before the next morning, but they weren't. Things between us continued as they usually did. Only now we would sneak kisses during the day and always spent the night together. He never asked about Vincent, and I was grateful. I didn't need a reminder that what I was doing was dangerous and risky. I was conflicted and confused. I didn't want to leave Vincent, but I also knew that what I had with Milo was special. There was no realistic conclusion to what I was doing, one where I got what I wanted. I barely knew what I wanted. I knew that, but it just felt like I needed to think only about myself for just a little bit. I finally felt like I was experiencing life and reclaiming myself. I didn't want to give up that feeling, so I pushed all thoughts of Vincent to the back of my mind and continued to enjoy my time with Milo. We even spent my birthday together. I'm not sure what I was thinking back then. I know I wasn't delusional enough to believe that I could have a life with Milo when my life was waiting for me back in America. But like I said, I didn't want those feelings to end. So I ignored the voice in my head telling me that it would end badly. Towards the end of the trip, I expected things between Milo and I to die down, but they became even more passionate. Like we both understood that we had limited time left. In the end, and I know this isn't really fair, but I mostly blamed Vincent. I blame him for how much we drifted apart and how he'd let me go on for so long without a proper break. Maybe if he hadn't, I wouldn't feel so burnt out and resentful of our marriage. But anyway, back to Bali. Eventually the trip came to an end, and I had to say goodbye to Milo. It felt like we had built a genuine connection over the past 2 weeks, so despite the fact that I was going behind my husband's back, I knew I was going to miss him a lot. I tried to clear my head of all thoughts of him on the plane so I could go home with a clean slate and get back to the life I left behind. When I finally got back home, though, Vincent was gone. So were his clothes and his other things. I tried not to panic, but failed miserably. I was practically hyperventilating as I went from room to room, checking for some sign that he had ever even lived there in the first place, but there was nothing. I was beyond confused, and I tried everything to reach him on that first night. I called and texted him over and over again, but there was no response. I even tried reaching his friends and his mom, but nothing. This went on for days. Days of me trying everything I could to reach Vincent with my phone before I finally gave up and went to see him in his office. I knew before I even left that I wouldn't find what I was looking for. His work was remote. He usually spent days or even weeks without going to the company. They told me what I already kind of knew, that Vincent hadn't come in a while. This whole thing lasted for the whole week after I got back. I continued my shifts as usual and would come home every day, hoping that Vincent would be back when I got there, cooking dinner and opening the door for me like he almost always did. After that week, I started to think about how I could come to terms with the fact that he had just up and left. I knew he wasn't hurt or anything because his phone rang and my texts went through. They just also went ignored. Finally, a few days later, I received a text from him and it said, "I hope you found what you were looking for." Attached to it was a link and a document. I clicked the link first and I was horrified by what I saw. It made my heart sink, but it also helped things start to make sense. It was the link to an Instagram highlight. For a second, I was confused as I flipped through it, but then I got to the photos and videos of me and understood that it was Milo's page. Milo always had his phone on him, and he was always recorded something or the other. I didn't think anything of it. I thought that maybe he was obligated to make videos of the fun activities the hotel had to offer. And when he was recording me and taking photos of me, sometimes way too close to him, or even when we were kissing, I just assumed that those ones were more personal, that he would keep them with him, to remember me by or something. It was something that I originally thought was cute, and now it had ruined everything. I didn't know or understand how Vincent had found his page in the first place, but there was no point dwelling on it. It wouldn't change the fact that he had seen me kissing and cuddling with a foreign man in a foreign country, all while I was calling him every other day and assuring him that I was fine and that I would see him soon. It all made sense. Why he and all his things were gone, why he had ignored me for a whole week. And with that in mind, I opened the document with my heart in my chest. It was the digital copy of divorce papers. I couldn't believe my eyes or what I was reading. Before I could finish going through it, another text from him came in, and it said that his lawyer would be in touch with me soon. This made me truly desperate, and I spent that night calling and texting, leaving messages where I begged him to think about things and not rush into this. I fell asleep in the process and woke up to find that I was now blocked by him. I tried reaching out to some of our mutual friends to ask if they'd heard from him or seen him and what I could do to convince him not to go through with the divorce. They were all strange and blatantly unwelcoming toward me. I knew then that Vincent must have told them what happened and poisoned them against me. I have no idea what to do now. Vincent's lawyer hasn't called me or anything, but I know he will soon. Going to the hospital every day while dealing with this is making me even more exhausted. It's even worse now that I have no one to confide in or talk to. My life has turned into a mess because of my one mistake. I'm alone, and I finally have the freedom that I always wanted. Only now I have no one to share it with.